Chapter 142 to 143. The army began to orderly withdraw from the abandoned mine, and command was returned to the leading knights of each kingdom. However, everything that happened here left a mark on the soldiers' hearts. Tristan, Bedivere, Lamorak, and the rest needed to assess the extent of their losses, so they acknowledged Shirou and led the soldiers away. Only Shirou and Artoria remained behind. Fu! Fu lay on the soft grass, tumbling about and scanning her surroundings with her gaze. Gawain, accompanied by Gareth, approached Shirou and Artoria, his face displaying gratitude as he spoke. "Your Excellency, Arthur." "Artoria, I cannot express my gratitude enough. Without your assistance, my sister would have been in grave danger just now." "It was nothing. We simply did what we could." Shirou smiled and waved his hand. "You are truly a humble person," Gawain responded respectfully. As Shirou waved his hand, his eyes landed on Gareth's adorable and youthful face, evoking a sense of emotion within him. He had initially believed that the disguised Magus was Morgan Le Fay, but he never imagined it would be Gareth, her daughter. Gareth was also a knight of the Round Table, the seventh knight, renowned as Gareth of the Gentle. She happened to be the younger sibling of Gawain, Agravain, and Gaheris. Noticing his gaze upon Gareth, Gawain lightly tapped his forehead and spoke with a smile. "I nearly forgot to introduce her. This is my sister, Gareth, an apprentice magus." Curious, Shirou asked, "Why did you feel the need to disguise yourself?" Gawain replied, "It's a magical protection bestowed upon Gareth by our mother." "I see." He nodded, smiling. "To be honest, at first I thought she was my sister, Morgan Le Fay. It's not unexpected that Your Excellency Arthur would have thought that way. In fact, our mother was always by my side before," Gawain explained. "May I ask where my sister is now, Sir Gawain?" Shirou asked calmly. He couldn't help but be concerned about Morgan Le Fay, as a witch who held the power of the island. "My mother returned to the kingdom a month ago," Gawain replied, turning his head to look at Gareth and Artoria. He spoke helplessly. "My sister had heard rumors about the Night Princess's tale and escaped from the convent to beg me to take her to see the Night Princess. She nearly met with an accident. In any case, thank you very much, Your Excellency Arthur and Artoria. Otherwise I wouldn't know how to explain it to my mother." Gawain looked grateful. "It was nothing but a small gesture, Sir Gawain," he replied. However, the news that Morgan Le Fay had departed from Camelot a month ago was significant information. Gareth stood next to Artoria, her eyes gleaming as she gazed at Artoria and expressed her gratitude. "Sir Artoria, thank you so much for your assistance earlier." "Sir, I apologize, but I'm not a formal knight yet. I don't deserve the honor of being addressed as Sir," she remarked, shaking her head. "Is that so? Then thank you very much, Lady Artoria." Gareth responded gratefully. If it weren't for her intervention, she would have been devoured by Cath Palug. "No need to be formal. It's what a knight should do," she declared, her expression resolute. Gareth stared at Artoria, her eyes shining with admiration. Suddenly, a trace of hesitation flashed across her cute face, and she asked carefully, Lady Artoria, may I touch your sword?" Artoria instinctively hugged the caliburn in her arms and refused without hesitation. "No, this is the king's sword. I can't let you touch it so easily." "Oh, I see." Gareth's face looked a bit disappointed. At this moment, Shirou's voice timely sounded. "Artoria, it's okay. I allow it." "Well, if you really want me to—" "You never cease to give me these troublesome requests. You're truly a handful, my king," she mumbled, her beautiful face filled with worry as she set the sword down in front of Gareth. Gareth's eyes gleamed as she delicately laid her hand on the scabbard of Caliburn, and then unsheathed the sword by gripping its hilt. Clang. The blade was drawn, and Gareth examined the sword's surface with an innocent expression that gradually evolved into a determined one. She then solemnly sheathed the sword and returned it to Artoria. Shirou approached Gareth and smiled as he patted her shoulder, asking, "Have you discovered your own answer?" Initially baffled, Gareth quickly comprehended what Shirou meant and beamed as she nodded her head. "Yes, thank you, Your Majesty. I have found my answer." "What answer?" Gawain and Artoria looked puzzled. "I don't think it's my place to say," Shirou replied. "Well then, Sir Gawain, I believe Artoria and I must return now." He waved to Gawain before departing alongside Artoria. Gawain shook his head in bewilderment, still unable to comprehend what Shirou had meant. Meanwhile, Gareth gazed at Gawain with sparkling eyes and declared, "Brother, brother, I have made a decision. I no longer wish to be a magus. I want to become a knight." "What?" Gawain was stunned. "Please let me be your squire and start my knightly training," Gareth said with shining eyes. The Night Princess, Lady Artoria, had revealed to her the answer. Women, too, could become powerful and exceptional knights. Her path should no longer be that of a magus. Gawain, meanwhile, was at a loss, pondering what had just happened. Most importantly, his sister now yearned to become a knight. How could he explain this to his mother? He feared he might receive a beating. Considering the consequences, Gawain said with a cold sweat on his face, "Gareth, I think you need to think about it more carefully. Your Majesty, please be mindful of this. Caliburn is a symbol of the king and should not be touched by others so casually." Artoria kept nagging at Shirou as they approached Caerleon. Shirou smiled and remarked, "You talk a lot now, Artie." "Huh? No, I'm not trying to lecture the king. What I mean is," she hastily explained, but he interrupted her by patting her shoulder and saying with a smile, "There's no need to rush to explain. I don't think it's a bad thing at all. It means that you're becoming better at expressing your inner emotions. That's a good thing." "My king, you're too kind." She lowered her head, feeling embarrassed that Shirou was so concerned about her. Shirou smiled, but his gaze unconsciously wandered to Artoria's smooth and tender neck. "Eat, eat, 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 eat. Humans, food, eat, 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 eat." The voice of inhuman temptation echoed in his mind. Shirou unconsciously licked his fangs, causing his body to tremble. He quickly patted his forehead and turned his head away, trying to regain his composure. "What's wrong, my king?" she asked with concern. "Are you feeling discomfort from being swallowed by that monster earlier?" Looking at her concerned face, he shook his head and said, "No. You are thinking too much. I was just thinking that the bastard should be coming soon." "Bastard?" She was taken aback by Shirou's choice of words. Before she could ask, Merlin's voice interrupted their conversation. "Your Majesty, Lily!" She turned her head and saw Merlin with a smile on his face, waving and running towards them like a child. Was Merlin the bastard that the king was referring to? Shirou turned to look at the foe on his shoulder, then raised his hand and pointed at Merlin, who was running towards them, saying, "Fu, did you see that? That's the good thing I want to treat you to. That thing is called Merlin. It's especially delicious. You can fry it or steam it, so don't hold back on my account." "Fu!" Fu turned her head and looked at Merlin with sparkling eyes. As Merlin ran towards him and stopped about 20 steps away, Shirou smiled and greeted him. "Merlin, where have you been all this time? I missed you so much. Don't keep your distance. Come closer." Merlin studied Shirou's expression carefully, then took 5 steps back and replied with a smile. "To be honest, I've been preoccupied with some matters lately, so I couldn't come and see you. But truthfully, I also missed you, Your Majesty." "If you miss me, then come closer," Shirou urged, taking a step forward. However, Merlin quickly retreated 3 steps and waved his hand. "No need for that. Two big men standing too close to each other isn't a good idea. Shirou's face softened into a gentle smile. I want you to come closer. But as soon as Merlin saw his smile, he quickly took 10 steps back. Shirou's smile faltered as beads of sweat formed on his forehead. This guy had gotten smarter, and his usual trick didn't work. And just as he was feeling frustrated, a voice filled with resentment interrupted their conversation. Merlin! The voice rang out, the resentment in it impossible to ignore. Shirou turned his head and saw Kay walking towards them with his sword drawn. His teeth were gritted and his body exuded a terrifying aura, making him look like a demon from hell. Upon seeing Kay approaching, Merlin's face changed and he trembled, stepping back. Shirou couldn't help but wonder, Kay, what's wrong with you? Why such strong resentment? Kay pointed his sword aggressively at Merlin and replied, This scoundrel actually transformed into my appearance and went around fooling people. If I hadn't escaped from a group of women and caught him transforming back into his original form from mine, I would still be in the dark about his mischief. You actually found out. Merlin trembled all over without saying a word. He turned around and ran. Scoundrel, don't you dare run away! Kay chased after him aggressively, determined to catch the mischievous Magus. Merlin claimed to be good at running away, but under Kay's wrath, the knight's speed was so fast that he was almost like a super saiyan, closing the distance between them in the blink of an eye. No, this can't be happening! How can you be so fast? Merlin was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. He had no choice but to draw his sword and prepare to fight against Kay. Clang! 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 The sound of metal clashing echoed as Merlin, a magus, fought against Kay, a knight. The outcome was inevitable, and the fight ended with Merlin sending Kay's sword flying with a single flick. No, this can't be. You're a magus! How could your swordsmanship be so strong? Kay was greatly shocked by Merlin's display of skill. Without this swordsmanship, how could I play around like this? Merlin said with his arms akimbo, looking pleased with himself. Not to boast, but when it comes to swordsmanship, I am second to none. No one in all of Britain dares to claim the top spot. Truth be told, your fathers, Brastias's and Sir Ywain's swordsmanship were all taught by me. Damn it! Kay pounded the ground in frustration, feeling powerless against his arch-enemy. The presence of someone he could not tolerate being right in front of him made him extremely uncomfortable. At this moment, Shirou beckoned to Kay, calling him over. Kay, come here. Let me teach you a move. What move? Kay leaned in to listen, curious about what the king had in mind. Merlin showed a disdainful look, confident in his belief that his swordsmanship was unparalleled in the world despite being a magus. When it comes to swordsmanship, no one can compare. But suddenly, his face turned blue, and he quickly put away his sword before turning around and running away. Why are you running? Kay, who had learned the skill from Shirou, chased after him aggressively. Come here. Artoria looked at Shirou with a puzzled expression and asked, My king, what move did you teach my brother? It's just spitting, he replied nonchalantly. What? She was dumbfounded, wondering if she had misheard. Spit? She looked stupefied. Isn't that something children do when they play? As long as it works, who cares what move it is, he said with a shrug. In the distance, Merlin howled, Oh my God! Don't spit anymore! Don't spit anymore! It's too disgusting! You're all too disgusting! Shut up! Kay chased after him while spitting, Tui! Tui! Shirou and Artoria stood on the grass, watching Merlin and Kay in the distance. It was like watching a cat chasing a mouse, and the animated sight nearly made her burst into laughter. But she made a conscious effort to suppress her amusement. He gave her shoulder a gentle pat and said, If you feel like laughing, go ahead and laugh. No need to hold it back. She looked at Shirou's profile and then nodded. A youthful smile of a young girl appeared on her exquisite and pretty face. Phew! Fu jumped off Shirou's shoulder and with her gem-like eyes watched the duo chasing each other. "Oh my God, please stop spitting! It's so filthy! It's too disgusting! Where's the honor of a knight in this kind of play?" Merlin howled in the distance. I surrender! I surrender! Sir Kay, your majesty! I admit my mistake! I admit it! I know I was wrong! You can make me do anything, just please no more spitting! Kay, Ptui! I am the great wise man who has protected Britain. Even if you don't remember my deeds, I hope you will remember the past. I was your father's swordsmanship teacher, and I also taught your adopted sister strategy and tactics. Even though I am a magus, without the honor of a knight and not even considered human, at least I have the face of a man. Why do you insist on making me wear women's clothing, Kay? Merlin stood in the inn, his gaze fixed angrily on the gray skirt that Kay had thrown at him. Kay stood silently, his face clouding over as he pressed his sword against Merlin's neck. Merlin disdainfully looked at the sword and proudly said, "Do you think a sword can make me, Merlin, submit? I'm telling you, it's impossible." "I spat on this sword," Kay said. His face changed, trembling all over. I'll wear it. Just keep your distance. Please don't touch my skin." Kay sneered and put down his sword. A single tear trickled down Merlin's handsome face. "This is ridiculous. I am clearly a man. What has become of the knight's honor?" He secretly cast a glance in Kay's direction. Kay's expression remained blank, but an aura of intense pressure radiated from his entire body. His eyes were bloodshot and intimidating, and he seemed almost poised to strike at Merlin with his sword. Indeed, if Artoria had not intervened, Kay may have actually attacked. "This is getting out of hand," Merlin lamented in his heart. At this point, Shirou said, "Kay, Artie, could you both step out for a moment? I need to speak with Merlin in private." Kay and Artoria both nodded, and as Kay turned to leave, he held his sword firmly and spoke fiercely. "If you dare to go around flirting with my face again, I'll cut off that thing of yours." He gestured with his sword, frightening Merlin to the point where his face turned pale. I understand," Merlin said with a pale face. Kay let out a cold snort before turning to leave. Merlin watched his departing figure with a sense of relief, and he patted his chest while letting out a deep sigh. Tsk, tsk, tsk. Shirou clicked his tongue. "Evil begets evil." "Merlin, don't you think so?" Merlin replied indignantly. "Why do you make me sound like a villain? I have not done anything wrong." Shirou couldn't help but laugh. "You might want to keep your voice down, or else Kay might come back charging in again." Merlin's face changed, and he secretly glanced at the door, relieved to not see the berserker who had abandoned his knightly honor. Then he raised his right hand, revealing a silver beast that had been biting into his arm. He spoke with an exasperated expression. "Can you please make this creature let go? I'm not something delicious to be eaten." Before Shirou could say anything, Fu released his grip and jumped to the ground, sticking out his tongue a few times. A voice resonated in Shirou and Merlin's minds. "It tastes terrible." Merlin let out a helpless sigh. "I am not something to be eaten, so how could it possibly taste good?" Shirou instigated with a grin. "Well, you did just bite his clothes. Of course it doesn't taste good. You have to bite meat to get a better taste." "Fu!" Fu set his sights on Merlin's exposed shoulder. Merlin spoke in a panic. "Why won't you believe me? Wait! Don't look at me like that! Don't do anything rash! I am truly not something delicious to eat!" "Fu!" Fu made a face of disdain before leaping up to the window, basking in the warm sunlight. Merlin let out a deep sigh of relief and muttered quietly, "Why must I suffer like this when I have done nothing wrong?" Shirou chuckled. "It may seem like you have done nothing, but in reality, everything is within your control, isn't it? Whether it's me absorbing Cathpalag's evil or Artoria coming to you for sword training, or even Kay giving up his knightly honor, everything is still under your control." Merlin was taken aback for a moment, then coughed a few times and replied, Surely it can't be that simple. Stop pretending to be clueless. It's not amusing anymore. This jerk had a weak appearance that could deceive Kay and Artoria, but he couldn't deceive Shirou, who knew him inside out. Shirou sat down on a chair and beckoned Merlin over, saying, "Come take a look. Ever since I absorbed Cath Palug's evil, I feel like there's something off about me." Merlin's expression shifted, and he walked over to Shirou, placing his hand on Shirou's back and reciting incantations that Shirou couldn't understand. "Let's take a closer look at the evil inside you." Shirou nodded and took a deep breath. In the next moment, a surge of black mud and thick blood gushed out from his back. "There are actually two types of evil?" Merlin was surprised. Shirou turned to look at him with a perplexed expression and asked, "Didn't you notice this a long time ago?" "I told you before I can't observe you. I can only observe your behavior," Merlin said helplessly. Shirou suddenly came to a realization. "Ah, so you weren't just pulling my leg back then." Merlin, "What kind of impression do I have in your heart?" "So, what's my current condition?" Merlin's expression shifted as he spoke. "Within your body, there are actually two types of evil present." He paused, appearing somewhat distressed, and continued. "I initially assumed you were an empty vessel, but it seems that something was already inside of you. Did those evil thoughts block my observation?" "What do you mean by vessel? Are you saying that I am an object that carries human evil?" "I don't know." Shirou was momentarily taken aback before asking, "Are you trying to deceive me?" "I'm not trying to deceive you. Why do you always think I'm up to no good? I never deceive people. At most, I simply keep certain information to myself." Merlin appeared helpless as he gestured towards his eyes and explained, "Have you heard of my ability, clairvoyance?" Shirou nodded. "If someone who possesses these eyes catches sight of the flames in your eyes, they can deduce that you are a vessel. However, the exact nature of what you carry within you cannot be discerned. Firstly, the evil thoughts within your body hinder the observation of clairvoyance, and secondly, there is no frame of reference for comparison among humans like you, who are vessels." Merlin went on to explain, "The same goes for me, as well as for those two individuals who used clairvoyance to peer into the distant future during the Age of Gods." "Gilgamesh and Solomon, right?" Shirou nodded, then looked at Merlin and asked, "So what does that mean for me?" "Honestly, ever since I absorbed the evil of Cath Palug, I've been experiencing an overwhelming urge to bite Artie's neck. Cath Palug imitates vampires and feeding on human envies and regret, which is also the reason why it has 3 eyes and is considered a vampire cat. You have borne this evil, so you will naturally be affected by this impulse," Merlin explained. "So, what will happen to me? Will I become a dead apostle?" "No, you are a vessel. Have you ever seen a cup filled with water and then become the water? The curse will affect you, but it will not change your human nature. However, you should be psychologically prepared for it." "What kind of psychological preparation do I need?" "While your human nature will remain the same, you need to be cautious as the curse can influence and change your inner self. If you're not careful, you may end up with a human appearance, but your existence will be completely non-human. To give you an idea, it would be similar to my situation. However, I'm an incubus, whereas you will lean more towards being a vampire." "So, you set me up?" "Why would I do that? I may keep some secrets, but I'd never intentionally hurt anyone. I didn't bring up Cath Palug because there was no need. Even if I had, you would have stumbled upon it sooner or later." Shirou wasn't convinced and replied, "Why are you so sure? You know I never engage in things beyond my capabilities. As a vessel, you will inevitably attract evil, and therefore, Cath Palug will eventually come to you." "That's not exactly what I was hoping to hear." However, Merlin was right about this. Even if Merlin didn't say anything, Shirou would probably still have to face Cath Palug in the end, not because of Merlin's vessel theory, but because he needed to unify all of Britain to return home. The unknown entity that left Cath Palug there was definitely an obstacle to his unification of Britain, so in the end, he still had to face Cath Palug. Shirou furrowed his brows as he stared at his palm. "Will I turn into a monster?" However, he quickly dismissed the thought, and with a sense of conviction, he clenched his fist tightly. "No, I won't," Merlin commented. "That's quite an expression worth collecting." "Well then, let me offer you a piece of advice, something that I don't typically do for individuals." Intrigued, Shirou turned to him and asked, "What advice do you have for me?" Merlin produced a bowl and explained, "This bowl represents the capacity of your vessel. The human evil you carry currently fills 70% of this vessel, while Cath Palug's evil occupies 20%. As long as you don't surpass this capacity, you should be safe. Furthermore, I, Merlin, can help protect you from Cath Palug's evil influence. However, if you go beyond this capacity, I cannot say for certain what will happen to you." He continued, "Moreover, your existence as a vessel born among humans is already an anomaly. There is no precedent for such a thing. Therefore, I strongly advise that you refrain from absorbing any more evil in the future. Otherwise, I cannot predict what you will become or what will happen to you. Do you understand the seriousness of this matter?" Merlin emphasized, "I cannot stress this enough, Shirou. Do not absorb any more evil. This is the only advice that Merlin, the wise man, can offer you." Shirou regarded Merlin with some skepticism and hesitated before asking, "Is this advice genuine, or are you trying to deceive me? Are there any hidden motives or deceptions?" Merlin looked at Shirou and smiled. "Guess." Shirou. "I understand." Shirou nodded, but sighed inwardly. Merlin was notorious for his deceitful nature, and it was difficult to discern the veracity of his statements. Nevertheless, he recognized the importance of his own safety, and so he resolved to treat Merlin's advice as if it were true. Shirou gazed at his evil flower and let out a deep sigh. Avoiding the absorption of evil seemed like an insurmountable task, especially given the nature of his ability. However, as long as he could prevent another encounter with the breed of calamities and avoid absorbing the evil they possessed, he should be able to manage the situation. At that moment, Merlin sat down, picking up some snacks from the table and beginning to munch on them. Shirou asked, "Aren't you supposed to be assisting me in blocking the influence of Cath Palug's evil?" "I have already cast the spell while we were talking." "Is that so?" He raised his eyebrows, impressed by Merlin's expertise as a magus. Despite his seemingly carefree and flippant demeanor, Merlin was an incredibly reliable ally when he was focused and determined. "Thank you, Merlin." He expressed his gratitude as he stood up. "I have some advice for you as well. You should try to find a way to placate Kay's anger. If he loses his temper one day, he might truly carry out his threat of castrating you." Merlin's hand trembled, and his complexion paled at the thought of Kay's wrath. Shirou turned to leave the room, and as he did so, Fu sprang from the balcony onto his shoulder. "Fu!" Fu chirped excitedly. "Take me to eat something good." "You promised me, remember?" "Okay, let's find something delicious to eat."